As I said, this comes out of a General Assembly mandate for Baltimore, Charlotte, Cleveland, New York, and Pittsburgh to address and improve the worsening plight of the African American male. So again, this is just one window, not just into the experience of the African American male, but the experience of African Americans in Charlotte, but as importantly, the experience of our entire city and our entire community. Ms. Grundy, whom we may need to call on as a resource, but in her introduction, she says, this history calls on all of us to take a broad view of educational endeavors, to acknowledge how closely schools are tied to the communities they serve, and to see school improvement as a necessary but far from sufficient part of a broader push for equality and justice. And it is in that light that we pick up this panel, and you will find in your packet a one-pager that invites you all to buy this book and find you will be matched with other congregations in October and November to read and discuss this book. But let's turn now to the folks that lived some of this history and again elucidate what we can learn from it. Let me ask each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and their context into this conversation, and we'll start with Justin.
Good morning, or I think we're not in the afternoon yet.
Well, not quite.
All right, my name is Justin Perry, and I graduated from West Charlotte in 1999. And I'm gonna give a spoiler alert, but so when I was there, West Charlotte was still in the midst of desegregation, integration, and which afforded me the opportunity to have rich academic experiences, of having a strong set of course offerings, and having peers that went to great schools all around the country. I mean, Ivy League schools, top HBCUs, any school you can think of. And we actually had a string of the most Morehead scholars in the district at that time. And, but it also gave me a lot of social education as well, because we had people from all walks of life, and we actually were challenged to kind of confront the realities of diversity. So it wasn't just diversity in terms of having bodies there, but it was also interacting and kind of addressing things. And so I grew up learning to be a citizen of the community and to be engaged. And while I was there, unfortunately, it was also at the same time that the lawsuit, the Capaccio lawsuit, was launched, which would end desegregation. And the reason why I can remember that is because I was a high schooler and got to meet James Ferguson, who Ms. Grundy mentioned earlier, and some of us actually went down to the courthouse to protest the end of that case, because we knew that undoing that case would lead us to where we are now, which is resegregation, not only in terms of race and economic, but also resegregation of opportunity. And so that's just kind of a brief intro of kind of my lens into this, and then I've come back to Charlotte now and actually am fighting with a group called One Met that focuses on housing and education, and looks at how they're intersected in terms of opportunity and figuring out what we can do to move forward at this point.
Thank you. You're not fighting with that group, you're leading that group, right?
That'd be true.
Elliot here.
Tell us what kind of Presbyterian you are.
My marriage?
Wait, you're an elder.
I got you. Well, yeah, I am an elder, but now I'm actually at the Grove. I've been coming to Presbyterian for a while, and now I'm actually at Hickory Grove Presbyterian.
Thank you. Elliot.
We always have to say where we come from and how we fit in. I'm Elliot Hipp, pastor at Park Ridge Presbyterian Church, and also in connection with what the task force is. Another thing that they're doing, we're working with our sister church, Woodland Presbyterian Church, to try to do some of the, we have a ministry team going to try to do some of the other things that we're talking about. In the last couple of days, I've gotten a few emails from John, and I found out that I'm representing the decade of the 1970s, which is sort of hard to imagine. You saw the afros and the disco, and asked my wife last night if I should try to find a leisure suit to wear. I graduated from West Charlotte in 1976, which means I started in 1973. I was there for all 3 years, back when high school was 3 years long. I was in the first wave of, and Pam explains all this very clearly in the book, the first time after 3 years of integration that the Judge McMillan and the school board really bore down and said we've got to keep the school from being closed the way that Second Ward School was closed, and we've got to begin to put the burden on other parts of town. And I was in that summer, started the summer thinking that, like everybody else that I'd ever known, I was going to be a sophomore at Mars Park, and by the end of the summer, I was a sophomore at West Charlotte. And so I was there when everything that Pam was talking about was we were figuring it out as we went along. How did we take the enormous significance of the school and the African American community and transition it into integration? How did we blend together? How did we become the school that people like Justin and for many decades after us could turn to and feel so good about? And there was a lot of trial and error. And by the time I graduated, after 3 years, we knew that we were well on the road to doing that, and there was an enormous amount of pride about that.
Good morning. My name is Arthur Griffin. I was born in Good Samaritan Hospital, all black hospital in Charlotte, before white people could go to Charlotte Memorial. Give to St. How old I am. I went to Second Ward High School. Matter of fact, all my early education was all segregated. Went to Alexander Street. I grew up in First Ward before they built the project. So I went to Alexander Street. And when the white folks moved out the upper part of First Ward, the black folk were able to go to First Ward Elementary, and then I went over to Second Ward as a 7th grader. Back in the old days, Second Ward was 7th grade to 12th grade. And certainly, as we talk about the generics of a segregated school system, I lived that. And fast forward through a whole lot of life experiences, I was on the Board of Education in 1985 when Charlotte started to grow again in terms of population. And I ended up on the school board in December of 2003. So I got to see a lot of this stuff that people write about and talk about in terms of what's right, segregation and desegregation. I got to see my little country town called Charlotte. In fact, when I talk to people, I tell them I went to the city of Charlotte Public Schools. A lot of people didn't know that the Charlotte City Schools was a school district of its own. I went to that school system. It eventually merged, and I can tell you the history of why it merged, but we don't have time for that. I would say, and I'm not a scholar of the Bible, I'll be the first to tell you that, but the little bit that I do read, it tells me something about poverty and justice. And what I understand from my life experiences, it's really easy to deal with poverty, to talk about it, to say I want to feed people, I want to give them a coat, I want to do something for the homeless. But we as a community, as a nation now, are moving far away from promoting justice in terms of dealing with the institutions and the root causes of a lot of these things that create poverty, poor education, poor health, etc. So I would hope that this wonderful audience and ministers and others, leaders in the community, would really start to focus on justice. And you certainly aren't going to move away from poverty, but you're not going to be able to build enough affordable housing. You're not going to be able to feed all the people who are hungry. You're just not going to be able to do that, because the first thing that comes to your mind is, I don't want my taxes to be raised. So what I say to you, the antidote to a lot of those things is for folk having a great education. When I served on the Board of Education, I said routinely, show me children who come from a home that's making $100,000 a year that can't read. And nobody will raise their hand. So I say to you, we really have to invest in our children and education. And we have to do the justice piece beyond these cameo editorials and presentations. The North Carolina General Assembly took $1 billion out of K-12 education. And now when they tell you I'm putting more money into K-12 education, they are putting more money. But they didn't tell you they took $1 billion out. That the enrollment has increased significantly, so more money is going. So go back and look at the record for the 1960s or 70s or 80s and see what they were spending per capita, per child, and what they're paying now. I always give this speech and I'll pass the mic along. When he went to school, it was $58 per classroom in terms of what was budgeted for classroom supplies. 2 years ago, it was $28. The General Assembly did raise it. So this year, it's $32 per classroom. So that's what I mean by justice, as opposed to the advocacy around the poverty piece, which we all need to do. Thank you for inviting me.
Hello, my name is Casey Haley. I'm a rising senior at West Charlotte.
Yeah, thank you, Kim.
So the only West Charlotte I've known has been a segregated one, and I was not thrilled when I found out I had to go there, and it was mostly because of like the stigma around it and everything. Going to West Charlotte, it was really just, it was very segregated. They were just one type of person, one type of people. And at first I was just like really, I had a lot of like hate towards the school. I didn't want to be there. Then I kind of looked and I was like, why is my school different than other schools in CMS? And I was thinking about how it's not our fault, or like the students who go there. And I saw the inequality. I saw what my school didn't have that others did. And I just was like, it's such a shame because there's so many great students here who just want the same opportunities, who have so much to offer. And I see, and everyone knows there's problems. The teachers, they just come in and out, maybe 1 or 2 years, and how much it affects the students. And then learning the history of West Charlotte and knowing that we have the potential to do so much and we have done so much, it just really made me want to make a change.
Amen.
My name is Amanda Barbie, and I sit on this panel. You just broke my heart. Just broke my heart. I have a long-standing history with West Charlotte, and I am so passionate about education in Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system. You know I'm passionate because sitting up here, I have to tell you how old I really am. I'm the class of 1984. My father taught at West Charlotte. How many people did my dad teach in here? In the 50s, he taught biology. There's somebody. It's always somebody. So we span over many years of the richness of West Charlotte. When I graduated from West Charlotte, it was as close to 50-50 as we could get. There were about maybe 3 to 4% ESL students, which made up for some of the students. But even in the extracurricular activities, the clubs were all 50-50. The homecoming court was 50-50. We did deviate a bit on the basketball and football team. In 1982, I was a member of the championship basketball team. The girls team went all the way to the state. We were 20-0, and we became 20-1 on my birthday. We lost on my birthday. But I also got my driver's license that day, so it wasn't all bad. When Pamela called and asked if I would interview for the book, I was thrilled. She also called Mary Helm a white student from Myers Park. I had not seen Mary in years, but because of the diversity, the camaraderie, the friendships, the richness of the education that we received at West Charlotte during that time, we were still finishing each other's sentences. That is what life was like for me at West Charlotte, which is why you just broke my heart. There are people that sit in this room today that can do something about that. My voice is loud and you all hear it often. But you who live in the non-black areas can do something about it. We need you at school board meetings. We need you to say this is not right. And I remind you today, as a people of God, the Gospel of John, and it says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Take a look on this stage, on this pulpit. Yes, and it still can. And you bust your behind to make sure that something good comes out of Nazareth.
And I am a 1978 graduate of West Charlotte. And I'm a third generation West Charlotte graduate. And this whole topic makes my heart hurt. I grew up in the neighborhood where West Charlotte exists. And I've made a decision as an adult to move back into that neighborhood. My experience at West Charlotte was probably when West Charlotte was at its best. I was on the yearbook staff and the journalism staff. And it was through those experiences that I met for the first time somebody that I could call a friend who lived in Myers Park. And I say that because my father and my grandfather were both plasterers. And if you know anything about plastering, all of the homes in Myers Park used to be made of plaster. And my experience in Myers Park had been going with my father and my grandfather to those homes to do estimates, to do repair work in those homes in Myers Park. And to stand as a kid and look at those houses and then go back to Beatty's Ford Road was crazy. But what I got from Beatty's Ford Road was character, it was determination, it was pure faith that I saw every day from folks like my father and my grandfather and my grandmother and my godmother, who all went to work in those homes in Myers Park. And so, when I had a different experience of having friends, that people that I could actually call on, that they weren't calling me to do work, they were calling me to do things that people do together that are friends in Myers Park, was a life-changing experience. And for me now, to be able to say, I work at Myers Park, has kind of shown that was a great education that I got from West Charlotte. And the relationships that form when we aren't afraid to cross those boundaries. They are life-changing. And we have to work harder than we are to make sure that future generations get the same benefits that we did and that they aren't cheated because of the color of their skin.
I'm Joey Martin. I'm a relatively new pastor at Sardis Presbyterian, where I think Sam Haywood was a member. And I graduated from West Charlotte in 1985, 1 year behind Amantha, but I'm much older than she is. And I was bused to West Charlotte from Eastover neighborhood with a lot of my friends. And I can affirm, especially Amantha described my experience at West Charlotte as well, very accurately, as does Pamela's book. A part of the conversation that I don't want to miss, and maybe it's not the most important part, but maybe it's where my voice fits in, is that diversity is a precondition for an environment of healthy growth. I saw this at West Charlotte, if that's the way West Charlotte was when we were there. It doesn't matter whether you came from Eastover or Babies Ford Road, you still benefited from that diversity and the healthy growth that came from it. My sister went to West Charlotte, my little brother went to West Charlotte, my little brother got 2 state championship rings in basketball from West Charlotte, which he doesn't let me forget. I was the white guy on the JV basketball team in 1988. And I had to look in the yearbook, Amantha and I were both in the French club together, and we're still about, I remember you a little bit because she was popular, I wasn't popular. We're about 3 heads from each other in the French club picture in the yearbook. But we're talking, West Charlotte now has students who are talented and hardworking. They just need an opportunity. In 1985, there was more opportunity. It didn't matter that I got bused over to West Charlotte for the sake of the school. You know what? It mattered that my parents came over with me. It mattered that my mom was raising money for the PTA. It mattered that my father, who a few years later was on the Board of Education, it mattered that he was always on the lookout for talented, hardworking students who just needed an opportunity. But I got more opportunity because of my time at West Charlotte as well. Because I saw a bigger world. And in very practical ways, my freshman year in college, my West Charlotte guidance counselor, Iris Battle, called me up in my dorm room, knew I was thinking about the ministry, and said, how would you like to spend a summer working at Greater Yosemite AME Zion Church with my husband, George, who's now Bishop George Battle. That changed my life. That opportunity doesn't happen for me if I don't get to go to a school like West Charlotte.
Thank you. Gives you a feel already for how their experience shaped them. What Pamela's book does beautifully, and what I want to further invite you to do as a tease to the book, and invite you to later in the fall to acquire it and read it and discuss it, is let's quickly now buzz through the decades, because the old saying about history is we've got to understand history, or the worst parts of it repeat itself. Mr. Griffin, Pamela's book details the era of segregation, the vast imbalances in funding and equipment between black and white schools in the years leading up to your time as a student. Black schools had larger classes, fewer advanced courses, fewer books, fewer science, business, technical classes. But she also writes about the high standards in the black schools that principals and teachers held, and how students embraced the push for excellence. From the classroom to the ball field, to the stage, to the shop class. Can you share just a brief snapshot of your era, a word or two, in the segregated schools growing up in Second Ward and watching West Charlotte?
Thank you so much. I don't know if I can do it in a word or two, but I'll try. Growing up at all of my schools, Alexander Street, First Ward, and Second Ward, I was absolutely blessed to have some of the best teachers that you can imagine on this earth. Those teachers, particularly at Second Ward and at West Charlotte, because I knew the folk over there too, really understood segregation, understood what the challenges would be for us as we matriculated and matured and went into the world. I can recall, they were called blackboards back then. They're called something whiteboards now, something. Anyway, Miss McKay, my 7th grade teacher. And everybody that went to Sackville would know Matt Hall and Lucille McKay. You had to diagram sentences. I don't even know if they diagram sentences anymore in school. But she said, you can speak that language outside, but in this classroom, you will speak the King's English and writing. And so the teachers then wanted to make sure that we were prepared to meet that world. And so life then was beautiful because not only from the academic side, but the social development side. You could always go to teachers if there were questions or problems. And teachers knew you. They knew the family, they knew the home, and really push you to be your very best. And at Second Ward, all of our kids were, didn't have the funds that other kids had. But the teachers treated us as we were the wealthiest kids on the face of the earth. So segregated experiences. I took physics, I took chemistry, I took trigonometry, but I can remember Mr. Levi in physics would thumb through the textbooks to say, we can't do these in class because we don't have this experiment, these pieces of equipment. We have to do these lab exercises because we do have equipment for that. Same thing for chemistry and biology. There was just a lack of resources that were provided to the African American community. When I served on the school board, I served Ashley Hardwood. He went to Central High down the street. And if y'all know Ashley, give him a call. He's a good Christian. Ashley would say to us, yes, Arthur, I used to walk up the hill from Central High, where Central Piedmont is now, up to Second Ward. And because the black schools and white schools had the same color uniforms, they brought us the blue and white uniforms from Central High up to Second Ward. So I can just simply tell you, it was a complete void of resources, but not void of value and honesty and grit to do what was right for those black students.
All right. Moving quickly then, everything changed in the 1970s after the court ruling to desegregate Charlotte schools, realizing that the myth of separate but equal was indeed a myth. Second Ward High School, Mr. Griffin's school, closed along with 6 other black schools, leaving only West Charlotte as what was then an all-black school. Busing displaced then, as it began, black and white families. Urban renewal added to the disruption of black families. Tensions ran high and fights broke out. School assignments shifted year to year. Pamela Grundy quoted somebody saying it was like the year starting over every year because of the constant shifting of trying to get the balance right. Then in West Charlotte, the Community Advisory Board formed to make a plan to make Charlotte something special, and it in time was lifted up as a symbol for what might be. Elliot Hipp and Donna Fair, you were there, you were part of that. Can you just share very briefly what was your experience and how did those years shape you?
I think in 1978 they finally kind of figured it out. It was peaceful, it was calm, and I say this because I lived right behind West Charlotte High School. So during the tumultuous early 70s, I could stand on my front porch and watch the fights that had broken out during the initial phases of busing. So by 1978, we had a great experience. We had teachers, black and white, who cared about all of the students that were at West Charlotte. We really felt it was important to be models for the community of how you come together, you take the best of what everybody has to offer, and you put it on the table, and you bake a cake with the best ingredients. And everybody took pride in West Charlotte. It didn't matter whether you were black or white at that point. I had a friend, her father was actually the editor of the Charlotte Observer back then, when we actually read newspapers. And they were going to be shifting again districts, and she was going to be moved out of West Charlotte's district. and they fought to stay at West Charlotte. The white people that went to West Charlotte came to love West Charlotte as much as we did as the people who grew up in that community. They became our friends again. We hung out together. We partied together. We went to McDonald's after the football games together. We became a family. And it was so important for us to set a pattern that we hoped would continue into the future.
You didn't go to McDonald's on the lunch period, did you? So I was 2 years before. We probably overlapped by a year before Donna. And I think we were at the very point when we were figuring out how to be what Donna was describing, because we didn't know in 1973 when they first put a substantial number of folks from the south and southeast side of town in and regularized that into what it was for the last 2 years I was there. We didn't know what it was going to look like. What I really appreciate, there's many things I appreciate about being in the book, but you sort of pulled back in your interviews and showed me some things that I intuitively knew were happening and confirmed, and especially the picture of the principal the second 2 years I was there. Dr. Gerson Strell was there the first year. Sam Haywood was there for 2 years along with Ms. Rice. And you also mentioned Marge Belton, who was our guidance counselor, going to him and saying, you can't erase our history. What I intuitively knew was going on, I think all of us, without being told specifically as that, was we were being shaped to understand that this school had a culture that was there before those of us who were brought in. That culture was not important, but vital to the community that I was describing right around the school. And that community was not going to let that culture go. And John, your question is what has continued to affect me over all these years. I think I had the enormous blessing at a relatively early age that so many white folks never get, which is that I had to let my culture go and accept somebody else's culture as the majority culture that I was living in. And that's life-changing and continues to inform, and I think obviously you preach all kinds of biblically based sermons on that, of letting ourselves go, to let somebody, and that's something that the black folks have to do, have always had to do. It's what Mr. Griffin is describing, what everybody has experienced. And for us to get the opportunity to be on the other side of that is the biggest thing that I have always taken away from that.
Thank you. Let's see how quickly we can cover the 80s and 90s before lunch real quick. In the 1980s, things really began to gel. Amantha is quoted in the book as saying it didn't matter who drove the Mercedes and who drove the old beater because we all had relationships. It's all beyond that. The benefits of diversity were realized. There was a time in West Charlotte of rising test scores among blacks and whites. West Charlotte had great school pride, but it's also true that it wasn't always easy. Feelings got hurt. Mistakes were made. People were misunderstood across cultures. It was imperfect, but it was also written up in the Wall Street Journal as a national symbol of how school integration can work. Reverend Barbee and Reverend Martin, what did you learn about yourself? If you haven't already answered that question in what you've said, what did you learn about your neighbors that you wouldn't trade anything for as quickly as you can?
What I learned about myself is that I could learn from people who were different. I could learn and share in learning with people from the other side of town, but right next door to me as well. I have a very specific memory of sitting in orchestra, and Abby Spangler, we just lost C.D. Spangler. Abby Spangler sat first chair, and I turned pages for Abby Spangler because I sat second chair. She was a year older, and I looked at her one day. I said, "Oh, you just sit first chair because you're white." And she laughed at me. She said, "No, it's because I'm better." She said, "But if you work with me, you will be better too." I'm a preacher, and she plays for the Washington Symphony. She was definitely better. Responsible to and for each other. And that carries with me and with us to this day. We have so much to give, and through diversity and by diversity, we can make that happen. And again, I say, and I'm going to give the mic to Joe, is that we have to do better. We have to dig deeper. We have a Secretary of Education who has not been in a public school per se. We can do better than that.
One, I learned in the locker room, in that summer internship at Greater Gethsemane, what it feels like to be welcomed into a group that you would not naturally be assumed to be part of, enthusiastically. You are one of us. We felt like the whole neighborhood of West Charlotte did that. When we went to a football game and the whole neighborhood showed up, all that mattered was the maroon and gold. Those are the only colors. But also this notion of modeling for culture, the rest of culture. I think most of us in West Charlotte, or many of us, we thought we were the most important public school in the nation because of what was going on there and the way we were doing it, and where there were conflicts, there were issues with race, but we learned how to struggle with them. For me, with my friends, it became a safe place to make those mistakes and to learn, because we didn't tiptoe around on eggshells. We were busy trying to have fun with our friends and learn things. There's time for us to think about the importance of that modeling. Moving back to Charlotte after being gone 32 years, I've lived here since I graduated from high school, basically. I've lived in a lot of other cities. It seems like there are a lot of churches in this Presbytery that wish their pews were a little more diverse on Sunday mornings, and that there was something they could do to fix that. I know that there are a lot of churches in this Presbytery that have buses. Can we, who care, do something to show the rest of the city how diversity leads to healthy growth?
Thank you. Very quickly, in the 1990s, just as a cautionary tale, as important as that is, Pamela's chapter on the 1990s is entitled Pulling Apart. Poverty became ever more concentrated in West Charlotte as the economy changed and certain jobs went away. Superintendent Jay Robinson cited diminished opportunity among black parents who were struggling to make a living to advocate for their children. Student achievement declined. County's resources were invested in the suburbs. Pamela talks about how corporate management philosophy came to Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools and a focus on end-of-grade schools. Magnet schools held 60% seats for whites and 40% for blacks. Student performance replaced, as she says, student performance replaced racial harmony as a key indicator of school system and community success. In West Charlotte, turmoil and leadership came to visit as superintendent, as principal changes, court ruling, lifted mandatory busing. One elected official said optimistically that he thought schools would then just integrate naturally. But hindsight shows that that's when things began to really unravel and inequality became more and more obvious. It opened the door in 1990s, as the book documents, to some outrageous language said by public officials of racial stereotyping and labeling. Justin Perry, what's one thing we need to learn from the 1990s and how it applies to today?
I think I went to a conference, a national conference on school diversity a couple of years ago, and they started out the whole thing talking about Charlotte and how it was a great model for successful integration, and that DC and Boston and Chicago and New York were trying to figure out what we did. And it was like Charlotte went from a national model to now a cautionary tale on what happens when you stop being intentional. And like both of them hit me directly in the gut. Like I felt the pride when they were talking about being a national model, and it hit me directly in the gut when it was like we're a cautionary tale, because that's exactly what we are. I always say, I love the use of the term organic, right? I hear people say I don't believe in social engineering, and I'm like, well, you don't believe in America. Because we're completely socially engineered. Myers Park does not look like Myers Park because of organics. It looks like that because of white supremacy and because of their deed restrictions that said this is going to be somebody fighting the race. That if somebody were to practice that is located right there on Park and Sullivan. So again, I have no ignorance to all these things. I think that what the lesson that we can learn from the 90s is that you can't rest on your laurels. Often when I hear people talk about the Charlotte way, it irritates me. Because it's such a loaded term, but it's also a co-opted term. Even as unsmooth as things were in the 60s and 70s, the truth was that people eventually had to confront some tough realities. Whereas what I see right now is that we just try to gloss over them and kind of pretend like there's not an issue. So to me, when I look at the 90s, what happened was the suburbs getting more schools. That was also a part that nobody talks about. It wasn't just busing, it was that schools had to be built where everybody had access to them. Providence was kind of the first thing that we saw when I was in there. Now it's everywhere, right? And now when we have things like our HB 514 that is trying to create separate districts for our suburban schools, we're doubling down on the ignorance of our past. So to me, I think it's important for us to look at those things and how do they play out today.
As Justin has said, and as I think we all know or should know, we have come full circle. Our schools are as segregated in Charlotte by race and class as they were when the initial busing ruling was mandated. Compound problems, gentrification of working class neighborhoods is pushing out poor and mostly black families with no affordable options nearby. CMS faces new, complex, intertwined social problems and face increasing competition from charter schools and private schools. Yet, we have with us a woman who has already given us hope, and I'm going to let her have the last word, and then I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. Casey Haley, tell us just a bit about your hope for West Charlotte High, what your personal plans are, and how we can pray for you.
Well, when I think about my hope for West Charlotte, we have this thing called West Cal that we do in our schools, which is when kids from RG Cal come to our school, we kind of talk about issues that face the students at both schools. We realize that we are really similar. So that gives me hope, but I also know that it can't just be something that happens a few times a year. We need to have students with different backgrounds just at our school every day, interacting with them. Because I know I can count on one hand the white students I've had class with in the last 3 years. And it shouldn't be like that. But then I think I try to use my voice, I write, I speak to people, and I love having kids from other schools come. We can talk about that. And I think, because honestly for me, I never cared, honestly, about educational equity until I went to a school where we were the ones who were suffering from these injustices. So I think the more you speak and the more people find out that these things are happening, that's how you can bring change. So just speaking out, that's what I like to do. And as I mentor younger underclassmen at my school, I hope that they kind of take some of that spirit, even though this is my last year. I see so much hope with the students who are coming up, and as long as they keep that alive and we let people know what's going on at West Charlotte, I think that change will come very soon. And even going out next year when I go to college and coming back and just talking to the students, and even this summer I went to the governor's school in North Carolina where there are kids from the entire state, from and just sharing my experiences with them. I know I opened their eyes a little bit, which was great, and I know when I go to college that I can do even more of that and meet people from all types of different places, so I'm very excited about that too.
Amen.
Just last comment. Jesus was an activist. And what I say to this group is, we'll be back to the 40s and 50s if you folk don't represent Jesus. The powers to be are taking us backwards. The piece of paper that was passed out to you, one side had West Charlotte 1971 when they were getting new uniforms because of desegregation. The other side of the piece of paper has 2015, where Myers Park was handing their hand-me-downs over to Garrington. Stuff's happening right to this day that's institutionalizing inequalities and inequities as we speak. If you don't become an activist, don't say, oh, how poor, how awful things are 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Diversity is important. When I served as a senior vice president in New York, now when I first started, it was all black. But then my kids went to desegregated schools. But in New York, you had to hire people. And in my little teeny budget, I had to spend $1 million on diversity training. How to make sure people that were different could work together. Where do you learn to lead people that are different than you? Where do you learn to be led by people that are different than you? You have a wonderful opportunity in a diverse setting to do that as young folks. It makes a healthier community. My children graduated from South Mecklenburg in a diverse setting. I'm just like, wow. They know them having babies. They know them at reunions. They know them in the workplace. And when they, as a citizen, start to vote on policies that affect the whole community, they do that with a better perspective. I say to you, be that activist, as Jesus was, because the challenges are there today, and we could have a much better world and community. I served in Vietnam with white folks. So I'm saying to you, we need each other. We need each other together. And I thank you for giving me this moment. Thank you very much.
The book is called Color and Character, West Charlotte High and the American Struggle Over Educational Equality. Your flyer is in your packet. You will be invited to read the book and gather with other Presbyterians, hopefully of difference, in October and November. We don't have time to recognize the task force or anybody else, but if you are a part of CMS in any way, graduate, parent, student, we give you thanks. I want to thank the group. My daughter from one Charlotte Mecklenburg school goes off to college at Wellesley in 2 weeks. My other daughter started this week as a teacher at CMS, and so I'm grateful for the inspiration you've given us. Please note that as you go to lunch, we're going to ask each of the panelists to sit at a different table. They're going to spread out, so they will be a resource to you at lunch. Sit down, continue this conversation, and let's thank our panelists one last time.